dear respectable professors and venerable colleagues. I am Burak Pirdal, Research Assistant at Yıldırım Beyazıt University. Today I will talk about my presentation, which headline is A Comparative Analysis of Fiscal Rules and Independent Fiscal Agencies. After a brief introduction, I will talk about aim, scope, and methodology. Then I will talk about the concept of fiscal discipline, fiscal rules, independent fiscal agencies, country experiences of on fiscal rules and independent fiscal agencies. Then I will mention conclusion and policy implication. After the World War II, budget deficits in many countries rose sharply due to increasing public expenditures. Some of these countries experienced severe economic crises. Therefore, they started to seek permanent solutions. Firstly, the theory of fiscal rules emerged. After that, independent fiscal agencies came to the fore. The aim of this study is to propose an analysis by comparing fiscal rules and independent fiscal agencies and devise a useful strategy for countries. Scope of the study is the comparison of fiscal rules and independent fiscal agencies, and method of the study is historical and descriptive analysis. Fiscal discipline means that public revenues and public expenditures are equal. It covers not only balanced central budget but also the balance of all public revenues and expenditures. Fiscal discipline is desirable for governments since sound public financial management is a must for macroeconomic stability. Thanks to fiscal discipline, political decision makers pay attention to the effectiveness of tax system and public expenditure programs which are necessary in terms of resource allocation and economic growth. Fiscal discipline is important in terms of meeting predictable and unpredictable fiscal pressures. And when it comes to fiscal rules, a fiscal rule is a statutory and constitutional restriction of fiscal policy that sets a specific limit on a fiscal indicator such as budgetary balance, debt, spending, or taxation. In short, we can say that fiscal rules are some sort of legal restrictions upon fiscal indicators such as government debt, government spending, or budgetary balance. There are some criticisms on fiscal rules as well. Fiscal rules often take place in an environment where there is not enough political support. Rules are often enforced with prerequisites. They have a character that will increase economic instability because they reduce the effectiveness of discretionary decisions. And there are some conditions necessary for successful implementation of fiscal rules, and they are as follows. Adequate public financial management system should be ensured. There must be reliable data. Budgetary aggregates need to be predictable. Budget reporting system should be comprehensive and in accordance with pre-announced schedule. It must be released and allow for external control. When it comes to independent fiscal agencies, there are two types of independent fiscal agencies: independent fiscal authorities and fiscal councils. Independent fiscal authorities are simply responsible for setting long-term objectives, targets, and adjusting some predetermined tax and expenditure packages. On the other hand, fiscal councils are responsible for providing objective analysis of fiscal policies. Previous studies indicate that the fiscal council, having a wider power, have a greater impact on fiscal discipline and improve the quality of fiscal policy. However, their effectiveness mainly depends on authority given to them and to their independence. They are also flexible. By technical assistance, they allow governments to follow independent fiscal policies. Therefore, they can be institutional solutions for excessive deficits. They also enjoy the legal protections against intervention and pressure from politicians. On the other hand, they can provide the government with technical assistance in the budgetary process. Econometric findings in this area support that they have more correct forecasts. Good statistical governance is a must for effectiveness of fiscal councils. Also, availability of reliable data is a key to a well-functioning fiscal council. On the other hand, tasks and missions of fiscal councils should be clear and implementable. There are some conditions for a well-functioning independent fiscal agency as well. For example, fiscal councils should be stand-alone and fully independent institutions. Their policy proposals should be in harmony with long-term or economic objectives of the government. They also should monitor the government's fiscal performance plan and policies, and they should develop macroeconomic projections, advise decision makers on policy options. There are some country experiences on fiscal rules and independent fiscal agencies as well. For example, in 1969, an article added to German constitution and it became compulsory for federal government to have a balanced budget. But Germany have had deficits in 16 years and budget surplus only in 4 years in the 20-year period between 1995 and 2015. In accordance with Maastricht criteria and the Stability and Growth Pact, European Union member states' budget deficit to GDP ratio should be maximum 3% and general public debt to GDP ratio should be maximum 60%. But there are only a few countries meet this fiscal rule. France is another country which cannot meet the Maastricht criteria for a long time. Its general public debt to GDP ratio has been well above the 60% for the last 20 years and it continues to increase. On the other hand, Liberty Bond Act and Graham-Rudman Holdings Code Act in United States simply didn't work. Also, in crisis times, fiscal rules are generally breached just like in Bulgaria and Finland. And here is the data belongs to the independent fiscal agencies. You can see the strong correlation between overall influence and independence and perceived impact on fiscal discipline and also formal guarantees on political independence and perceived impact on fiscal discipline. When it comes to conclusion, first of all, necessity of fiscal rules should be questioned. Governments can commit to credibly to fiscal discipline without any permanent rules. This situation shows us that credibility is built not also by rules but also by reputation. Rules enhance non-transparent behaviors of politicians like accounting tricks on circumvent the rules. On the other hand, if a country doesn't have a strong institutional structure, both methods simply don't work. Moreover, inflexibility of fiscal rules can be quite dangerous for the countries, especially in crisis times. Also, fiscal rules restrict the political aims. This means restriction of social will and that's not ethical. Rules are also criticized since they impose unnecessary bureaucratic transactions and generally cannot impose heavy penalties. Lastly, implementation of fiscal rules is quite hard for governments because of different economic cycles. The governments should adopt fiscal policies according to existing economic conditions. And in order to have a well-functioning fiscal rules, for example, transparency should be ensured. Countries should establish an institutional authority for surveillance of the fiscal rules. Rules should be flexible, and optimal rules should be transparent, simple, consistent, and flexible. And when it comes to independent fiscal agencies, they should be fully independent and their decisions should be binding to some extent. Consequently, for countries want to take more sound financial decisions, it seems to more logical to found a well-designed fiscal agency with capable employees, or if a country is determined to apply fiscal rules, this implementation definitely should be backed up by fully independent fiscal agencies, especially by fiscal councils. Thank you for your attention.